Hey, it's Kim with Guide to the Good, and this is an Inside Scoop. Today we are talking about mental health in the workplace, hugely important issue, and we are here with Raven Warren of SOAR, and she's got some really great things to share about that. Raven, tell us about SOAR. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I am the counselor with SOAR. SOAR started back in, officially, I guess, in September. The idea is that we're here to offer supportive services to people who are working in or trained in the skilled trades, also people who are considering entering the skilled trades world. I do some career consultation, but primarily I'm doing counseling with individuals who are in the skilled trades who are needing some extra support. And this is where we do it. This is the space that we do it from.
That is awesome. It's so important for people to feel, good and well. For us, for Guide to the Good, we're about sustainable communities, so it's absolutely vital what you're doing. So thank you. Yeah. So what is counseling? We're talking about counseling. What exactly is it?
That's a good question. And I think a lot of people have different opinions of what counseling means. So from my perspective as an individual, I think of it as a collaborative relationship where two people get together and get to know each other and decide a goal or some kind of long-term plan of things that they can work on together in sessions. Once they identify the issue or the goal that they want to work on, they decide together how to best go about doing that in a way that's most supportive for the individual and in a way that meets their individual needs. I think being flexible and being able to do what that person needs together as two people who come together and decide it is the most important part, because there's no one set way to do counseling.
Right.
It's all about how the two people in that relationship decide to do it.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, great. So right now, we're in your office. So this is where counseling sessions take place. Mm-hmm. So what happens? Walk me through it. What happens?
Good question. Lots of different things happen.
Yeah.
So right now we're working on a 10-session model. At the beginning of the project, we decided to leave it open-ended. There was no end in sight in terms of how many sessions a person could have. Now we have a wait list, so we had to decide to come up with some kind of plan to make sure everyone gets seen. So we're doing 10-session models.
Right.
They're usually 50 minutes a session, depending on the needs of the person, and often we do a bi-weekly session or every 3 weeks.
Right.
The first session, the person will come in and we'll kind of get to know each other. I'll tell a bit about my background. They can tell me a bit about themselves. It's more of an informal get to know each other conversation.
Yeah.
By the end of that session, I'll ask them to consider if they feel like this is something that could work for them. And I'll usually ask that after the first couple sessions, just to see if the person at any point changed their mind and maybe they're not feeling like they're able to even say that.
Right.
Because I want them to feel empowered to decide if the relationship works for them. And usually in the first session, we may establish, or at least start talking about establishing some kind of goal or some kind of issue that we're going to work on in our 10 sessions.
So that could be something workplace related or not necessarily workplace related, right?
Yeah, for sure. Most of the people who I've had referred to me are either working in the skilled trades or working, doing some kind of employment support program in the community. So generally speaking, employment or employment goals is something that they are in their daily life working on.
Right.
But the issue that they present might not necessarily be directly related to work. They might be dealing with some kind of interpersonal conflict at home, but it's affecting how they do everything in their daily life.
Right. Including
work, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can definitely also, there's lots of issues around work stuff that comes up in our sessions. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's the first session. That's the figuring it out session.
Yeah.
So then if it works out and the relationship is established and the person comes back, then what are some of the different ways?
Good question. For myself, I operate primarily from a person-centered approach. So I like to believe that the individual is the expert in their life. I don't operate from the old school approach that I have some kind of authority or expertise over them. I think that they bring a lot of really important resources and information and skills. And so therefore I try to use also a strengths-based approach where we figure out how they've, already navigated lots of difficult challenges in their lives, or some of the strengths that they might have to figure out new resources or new approaches. So in addition to those two, I also use narrative therapy a lot, which is basically figuring out, what our stories have been up to this point, what we might like for our stories to be, and how the culture around us impacts the stories that we're living. And I use a lot of arts-based approaches where we might draw, we might represent something through movement on paper. I find that particularly helpful for clients who maybe haven't spent a lot of time in their life talking about challenges and talking about how they feel.
Right.
I think often what we feel is physically in our body as a sensation, but we don't maybe have the word to describe what that tightness feels like or something.
Yeah.
So putting it on paper, I think, can be helpful for a lot of people who haven't yet gotten comfortable with saying the words to me.
Right. Wow.
But also through processing through things like trauma, it's really good too.
Yeah, that trauma-informed counselling.
Yes.
I've heard, you hear that a little bit more recently. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's also one of the primary approaches I like to use, because I think one thing I've learned about working in community for the last 12 years or so is that, trauma affects us all, whether it's that we've directly experienced some kind of trauma, whether it was a single event or some kind of repeated exposure to trauma, or if we know someone or love someone who has experienced it. I think we're in a way all kind of impacted by it. So I try to maintain that understanding of the impact trauma has on us as individuals, as a culture, as, a generation, but also to be mindful of some of the approaches that can be used to help people whose lives are affected by the trauma that they've had.
Right.
And so something like bilateral art might help us to process through the trauma that's trapped in our bodies by moving. Exactly.
Right. So bilateral.
Both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what people get to do.
Yeah, exactly. So we might look at a memory that's difficult. It could just be, a challenging memory where someone told us that we weren't good enough, which is a really common theme in my sessions.
Yeah. Well, most people have heard that one way or the other through their lives. Yeah.
Exactly. And in some way, if it's compounded by other difficult experiences, if in some way we've internalized that stays in our bodies, that feeling of not being good enough. So we might go back to the first memory or the worst time where we've heard that and felt that way and just represent it with our eyes closed on paper. It does take time to get used to the motion, the physical sensation being expressed on paper.
Yeah.
But it's a good opportunity to allow the person to feel those physical sensations and then process a new sensation, what they wanted to feel, what they really needed to feel, and then represent that. And essentially it allows our brains to complete this cycle. Maybe it was fight, flight, or freeze. Maybe they wanted to speak up and say, that's not true, I am actually good enough, but they couldn't because it was some authority figure or something. Right. Doing the bilateral art allows the person with their body and then integrated with their mind to complete that and feel what they really needed to feel.
Wow. That is fascinating. I want to do that. I want to do that.
I know, I love it. Now, the thing is, I have remind my clients all the time, it doesn't always work, and sometimes it might take 100 repetitions.
Right.
But there have been lots of times I've seen clients breathe this sigh of relief where they were like, I didn't realize how badly I needed to tell that person to shut up or to defend myself or to whatever, Wow. They got to experience that sensation in their body that was stopped somehow.
Yeah. Cool. So a couple of times you were referring to on paper, and it made me think, so, how do you learn to do this? What are the credentials for it?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to go about becoming a counselor. So for myself, I'm a Canadian certified counselor, which means I did an undergraduate degree in psychology at Memorial University. Then I decided to do my master's in counseling psychology, which came from all of my experience working in a trauma-informed field as a child and youth care worker. I realized I wanted to support the families just from a different angle.
Right.
I had lots of opportunity to support them as someone who works in their homes, but I wanted to learn more about how to support more. So I did my master's degree at MUN, and then I became certified with the CCPA, which basically that body holds me accountable to do as much ethical work as I can. The primary goal is to make sure that I'm never causing more harm, and ideally to help the person and benefit society in some way.
Right.
But I'm obligated by them and, of course, myself to do everything I can in my nature to make sure that I'm using approaches that are scientifically supported by, peer-reviewed studies, not to just be pulling stuff out of my hat and saying, here's a new approach I think might work, because that's not considered safe.
All of these supports to people, particularly in the area of skilled trades, it can be a high pressure environment.
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's really good. And you offer these services at no charge to people in skilled trades, and they don't have to go through an EAP or anything like that.
That's why it's great, because a lot of people only have their EAP program when they're being employed at the time. So when they get laid off, a lot of people don't have access to services. But we've also heard a lot of people in the trades say that, not just in the trades, but in general with EAP programs, there's some hesitancy around who might find out, even though there's usually some kind of guarantee that they wouldn't. People still hesitate to receive mental health support from places connected to their work or where they study. So we're not connected directly to any particular body. We have our own space. It is free. We can do in-person, online, over the phone services. So that's been great. I think it's a good opportunity for people who are working in a high demand, competitive, laborious, exhausting, challenging field. Very important industry to reach out for support. And I feel like I want to add that for people who are hesitant about things like art therapy, that doesn't have to happen in my sessions.
Right.
I enjoy it, and lots of clients do, but a lot of people prefer just talk therapy, and that's totally fine.
Right.
A lot of sessions with people is not, they might not know for the first 4 or 5 sessions what the particular issue is that they want to talk about. They might just know that they need someone to listen, and I can do that too.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to mention that for people who don't love the idea of coming in and talking about their feelings, that there are other ways that we can approach it.
Right. Cool. Okay. So so there's a number that they call. We can put the number up on the screen, and we can put the link to the SOAR profile, so we can have all that information. Yeah. That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for asking.
Well, and the all the things that you do, it's great because it helps people. It helps employment places. It helps build sustainable communities. So awesome.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So Raven Warren, counselor, career counselor, and
a personal counselor.
And SOAR. I'm Kim with Guide to the Good. Behind the camera is Melissa Wong. Please follow Guide to the Good. Find out more about SOAR on Facebook and on, what are the other things? Insta and our YouTube channel. You'll find this here. And visit us, www.guidetothegood.ca. Thank you so much.
Thank you.